I listened to the Supreme Court argument as I was driving to the studio today so that you didn't have to listen to the Supreme Court. They've only wrapping up. And I just want you to know that there is no way Donald Trump is winning this case. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your side of the aisle is. I don't care what your biases are. I listened to that case. When Clarence Thomas is asking critical, skeptical questions in oral argument of Donald Trump's lawyer, it's not a good sign for Donald Trump. And part of the problem is the hypothetical from the lower court. If you will recall, so the argument is that presidents have absolute immunity unless they are impeached, convicted in the Senate, and then they can be prosecuted over that thing that led their impeachment. Otherwise, presidents of the United States have absolute immunity. It's a nonsensical argument. Even ultimately, Trump's lawyer had to concede that for personal things not related to the office, the president of the United States can be prosecuted. Like, for example, Ulysses S. Grant got a speeding ticket in Washington, D.C. as president of the United States. What's remarkable is the lawyer for Donald Trump did not have a very good argument to the lower court hypothetical that was raised originally, and that is, can Donald Trump, as president of the United States, send SEAL Team 6 out to assassinate his political rival? Can he order SEAL Team 6 to do this? Sam Alito said he found the whole thing to be implausibly related to the powers of the president. The problem is Trump's lawyer argued that, well, he's the commander-in-chief of the military. He can lawfully order SEAL Team 6 to do things that he thinks are in the interest of the presidency. And if he has legitimate reason to think that his opponent is a threat to the country, then yeah, and then if he's impeached, then you prosecute him. Well, what happens if he starts assassinating members of Congress to stop an impeachment from happening? He didn't have a good answer to the scenario. He really did not have a good answer to the scenario. But then he said something, Trump's lawyer did, that raised a red flag to me that, aha, this is what they're doing. Everybody's over here looking at the absolute immunity argument, but he said something. So there's a case that the U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia decided a number of years ago. Bridgewater, I believe the name of the case is. And I think I've got that wrong, but that's what I've got stuck in my head as Bridgewater. But in any event, it laid out a rule for what is and is not immune from prosecution for a federal employee. And essentially, personal things can be prosecuted. Things done plausibly as legitimate roles in the office cannot be prosecuted. And there was a rule, particularly read in light of a concurring opinion, there was a rule that could be established. And so what I think it was John Roberts asked Donald Trump's lawyer is, so what you're saying is that the prosecution can continue, but it's got to be within these bounds. And he said, yes, obviously there would be more decisions forthcoming, and there would be more litigation along the way. And the way he said it made me realize Donald Trump's lawyers know they're going to lose the case, and they're okay with losing the case. They're okay with losing the appeal. What they're playing for is more time. What they're playing for is running out the clock, and that's working. It made me realize what Trump's lawyer was essentially conceding is that they're okay with having no absolute immunity, but they want a rule where they can argue that Donald Trump's conduct was conduct as president, not conduct as candidate. And they want to be able to argue that rule in court. So then they have a whole nother cycle of appeal to the Supreme Court. So then they get past the November election. I don't think people on the left or right really appreciate that. And I think I'm right on this. I really, based on his arguments, that Trump's lawyer says he wants rules in place that can then be further litigated. They never had any intention of winning this case before the Supreme Court. They're not going to win this case before the Supreme Court. Sam Alito was skeptical. Clarence Thomas was skeptical. Neil Gorsuch was skeptical. John Roberts was skeptical. Good Lord, Sonia Sotomayor was ready to put Trump in the electric chair in the arguments. Ketanji Brown Jackson she actually struck me as very intriguing lines of questions and also very frustrated with Trump's lawyer. Elena Kagan. Donald Trump, if he gets out of this, I wouldn't be surprised to have a 9-0 decision. You may have a 6-3 decision, depending on how broad or restrained there is, but Donald Trump is not going to get out of this case winning. What he is going to do is he's going to get a rule, because the D.C. Court of Appeals went too far. See, what's being appealed to the Supreme Court, what the argument today was about, is the D.C. Court of Appeals essentially said presidents have no immunity whatsoever, which is also wrong. It's well-settled jurisprudence in the United States that presidents have immunity for actions taken that were plausibly based on their duties as president. So, what that means is, if the president financially benefits through a bribe, he appoints someone to office, but he got a bribe, he can't be prosecuted for the appointment, he can be prosecuted for the bribe. Because the bribe benefited him personally. Neil Gorsuch raised the concern that if the court doesn't get it right, what you're going to see is presidents giving themselves blanket pardons on their way out the door every 4 years, which I don't know that even works. In my understanding of American jurisprudence, based on British jurisprudence before it with the king, is the power of the president flows out from him, not towards him. Therefore, he can't pardon himself because that's a power would flow back to him. That'll be argued another day. Can a president pardon himself? Richard Nixon didn't think he could pardon himself. Gerald Ford had to do it. I think there's some precedent there that'll be paid attention to, but that's besides the point. The point here is that the President of the United States doesn't have blanket immunity. And Trump's lawyer tried to argue that, but in arguing that, what it was very clear to me was they're just Biden time. They're waiting for the election. Their presumption is that he's going to win in November. And I know there are a lot of progressives who think he's not going to win, but pay attention to the polling. Now, we've actually really got to spend some time on the raw politics of this case at the bottom of the hour, the raw politics of the campaign trail, because even the Biden administration's administrative state is rushing rapidly to change rules in ways that suggest they think Biden's going to lose a second term. They're rushing so fast to get rules done, they're taking shortcuts that could actually undermine them if the Supreme Court gets involved. But in this case, I think that everybody's missing the core point here. They're running out the clock. They're trying to get to the election. Because if Donald Trump does get reelected, everything gets paused while he's president. Because even the Supreme Court agreed today that unless the president is removed from office, he can't be prosecuted. While he's in office, he's not going to be prosecuted. They're trying to get Trump back in office to hit the pause on this. And once Trump gets back in office, he could fire Jack Smith and dare Congress to impeach him. He could fire everybody, all the lawyers involved. He could fire them and put his own people in charge, who then have the cases dismissed. Donald Trump could do that, and then Congress could attempt to impeach him. Good luck. Donald Trump couldn't undermine the state cases, the Fani Willis case in Georgia, or the cases in New York, the case in New York, but the case in New York has fallen apart in and of itself. Alvin Bragg's entire theory of the case is now being ridiculed even by progressives on MSNBC. Fani Willis is undermining her own case in Atlanta. So good luck with those. But the federal cases, if Trump gets back in office, he could scuttle those cases. He's got the power to, and then dare Congress to impeach him. And by the way, I think if the voters of the United States vote to put Trump back in office, they're not going to care if he gets rid of those cases. Most of them see them politically motivated anyway. That's why Jack Smith is trying to rush, particularly the classified documents case. That's the best case against Trump. It's always been the best case against Donald Trump. These other cases are kind of frivolous cases against Trump. In the Supreme Court today, Donald Trump's lawyer found no friends. They had to have left the court today realizing that when Clarence Thomas himself is asking skeptical questions of Donald Trump's lawyer, Clarence Thomas is not going to side with what Donald Trump wants. They may provide a better rule, which they should do. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals went too far. Even Elena Kagan hinted at perhaps the D.C. Court of Appeals might have gone too far in their rule, but they're not going to give Trump an immunity case. So what's now the next step? What happens is we have to wait for the Supreme Court. So it's April. The Supreme Court will probably not reach a decision in this case until the middle to the end of June. So Trump's case can't go forward until the middle to the end of June. And then once it does go forward, we have to see the state of play. Do the Supreme Court send it back to the district court? Do they send it to the Court of Appeals? Do they provide a rule? If they provide a rule, that then gets litigated by the judge at the district court level, which is then appealed to the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is then appealed to the Supreme Court. This case could be years before it goes to trial. The left sold Americans on a bill of goods that all of these cases could be rushed this year. That was never going to be the case. The reality is that all of these cases are going to take time. The Alvin Bragg case in trial right now in New York, the left itself is baffled by Alvin Bragg's theory of the case at this point. You're seeing less and less coverage of it because the left realizes Alvin Bragg's case is not strong. They love the salaciousness. They love the dirt. They love the smears at Trump. But the underlying legal foundation of the case is really weak, and they know it. They're not going to get Donald Trump in court. They're going to have to beat him at the ballot box. And beating Donald Trump at the ballot box is no sure thing. Have you seen the polling? We're going to get into the polling. It's not good for the Democrats.